you're in this room.
Yeah.
Is it really the room that you're supposed to be in? Have you truly taken a step back? Why are you fearful to leave this room and go find the one that you're supposed to be in?
Welcome to the She Cultivates podcast, a space where faith, personal growth, and meaningful connections come to life. My name is Elizabeth Savillon, and thank you for joining me on this week's conversation. Make sure, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review. All of that helps us to grow. And also check out our new studio space in Hi Hello Labs in downtown Orlando, where you can produce, execute, and create your own content. And if that's on your vision board, make sure to visit them down below. I'm honored to have on this week's episode Arlene DiBenigno, which is the founder and CEO of Women's Conference of Florida, as well as Conversa. She is an amazing individual that empowers women to live out their full potential and gives them tools and practical tips. And so she has an amazing story to share with us today. And let's just get into this week's episode. I'm very excited for today's conversation because we have a woman that collaborates, just gives such confidence, and in every space that she's in, she just really brings up women. And so I'm so honored to have you here today, Arlene.
Thank you for having me.
You are amazing. And we met we've known of each other, right?
Yes.
But we met this past year in person.
Mm-hmm. We did finally.
Yes.
Finally, because we had tried to meet in person before then, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
But here we are.
No, I am so glad that you're here.
I feel like we've known each other forever.
Yes, yes. And you are, I would say, such a supportive woman that I know invests in different generations, that always uplifts women. And that's how I know you. So can you just share with the audience today, a little bit about your story?
Yes. I have to say, someone opened a door for me at 19 and that honestly should not. I mean, it was a professional risk and they did. And I ran through that door. And I think that is really, for me, that piece of giving back is very important for that reason, because I am where I am today because that individual took that risk on me and provided so many opportunities that a 19-year-old should have never, ever had, and entrusted me. And that really gave me so much professional and personal growth at such a young age. And so it really has shaped me personally, emotionally, professionally, and it has empowered me to be able to do so many things. And so I'm a big, big believer in not only helping other women, because there are so many different industries where we need to be doing so much more. I also think that sometimes women struggle in helping other women, but also that next generation. I think sometimes we hold on too much and we don't really empower younger people that would add so much more to what we're doing. So I am a very big believer in that. Yes.
And I love how you always share about the people that open doors for you. So can we talk about those people? Because I look back at my journey. I wanted to be in journalism and a journalist. And so I had Mr. Hansen, which he passed away a few years ago, but he was someone that had his own small bilingual newspaper. And he's like, hey, you want to intern? You're in college. Let me bring you in. Let me show you the ropes. Let me get you in the rooms. And I remember I was where Barack Obama was here at Valencia College. I was able to cover his story. And I was
amazing.
Like, what?
I am 18. It changes your life.
Yes.
It changes your perspective.
Yeah. And that was so good.
One moment. Yes.
For sure. So who was that for you?
So for me, I was always very interested in politics and actually journalism all throughout high school. And for me, it was Jeb Bush. He obviously comes from a very political family, and he was in the real estate industry in Miami. His father had just become president, and a very dear friend of mine introduced me to him. He had an opportunity. He had just come back from helping his father run his presidential campaign. And so he had returned to Miami to continue his real estate career. And and he was in need of an assistant for a few weeks because his assistant was away on vacation. And so she called me and said, this is a great opportunity. I had just come back from Caracas. I had been there for a couple of weeks and I was really looking for an opportunity. And I said, sure. So I was with him for 2 weeks. I went to say goodbye at the end of those 2 weeks, and he said, no, I'm hiring you.
I love
that. Funny story, I told him many years later, and he was like, what? He did not know I was 19 at the time because I was afraid that, I was young and, so I was like, I'm 22. And he was, so we laugh about it now. Exactly. But he really did. But the beauty of it was he was involved in so many different things in the community, and he saw that I had a hunger to learn, right? And so he really gave me that opportunity to get involved with business organizations, to oversee and be involved in a lot of projects that he was working on. He introduced me to so many people. But then when he went to run his first attempt at running for governor was in 1994, and he entrusted me with fundraising, which you can imagine. No, it was very, very hard at the time. I mean, you would think that this person that you're working for, because of their political, legacy, it would be easy, but it was actually, times were different back then. It was really a person-to-person contact. It was a phone call. It was really, but it taught me so much. And I think what it more than anything taught me was to be bold at such a young age and not be afraid to pick up the phone. And I learned a very valuable lesson, which if you don't ask, people don't know what you want. And so it really, he really just sort of anything that I would say, I'm interested in this, I want to go, he would say, go pursue it. And so we were not successful that first campaign, but it opened the next door and the next door. And it introduced me to just so many different people from so many different backgrounds. I was able to spend an incredible time in Washington, D.C. and working on different projects that he would again allow me to work on. And so it just kind of really snowballed from there. And I've had the privilege of working, for 3 presidents, 4 governors, and a wide variety of projects from a policy perspective that really impact people. And so I think it also taught me compassion and empathy for individuals that are struggling and that are, going through so much, and the need that exists out there. And then when he finally became governor in 1998, he brought me to Tallahassee. And every governor has an office of appointments to boards and commissions. And he was very focused on changing the face of the appointments process, because if you looked at it, it was many white men sitting on these boards. And I mean, I'm talking everything from Board of Medicine, Board of Realtors, dentistry, every industry in the state has a board. And so he made the very bold decision to remove everyone, have everyone resign. And then he would make the decision. And so I remember he called me to his office and he said, I want these appointments to look like the face of the state. And the face of this state are minorities, women, and you need to go find them.
Wow.
And I would meet with him.
I love him.
Yes.
I love that he put
listen,
that.
An amazing leader, because it wasn't about politics for him. It really, he had been sitting in a very unique seat for so many years, being involved in politics, but he really cared about people, and he imparted that on the staff. Like his whole mantra was, if you're not here to serve, then you need to go. Wow. I mean, he was very serious about that. So I started this journey of really seeking out minority representation and female representation. Yes. And it was hard. Women would say no automatically. It was every time I called, every time I offered an opportunity, the first reaction, believe it or not, 95% of the time was no. I'm not ready. I've never done anything like this before. I mean, these were women that were running construction companies, that were doctors, that were in healthcare, that were attorneys, women that should have easily have said yes to me. And so that's where it really, at the age of 33, it opened my eyes to the fact that women we were holding ourselves back.
Yeah.
And it literally got to the point that he would say to me, why are you accepting no? Get in your car, drive to Orlando, drive to Tampa, drive to Jacksonville, Miami, wherever these individuals were, and convince them. And I did. I really, really did. And I started to see that although women had made many advancements, we were still struggling in so many different ways.
Because it can be kind of like scary when you've never seen it done.
Absolutely. But you know, the funny thing was, two things. There was one specific female CEO in Orlando that he wanted to serve on a very important board. And I drove here and I met with her for 3 hours. And at the end of the 3 hours, she finally said yes. And what we came to learn was that women made the best board members because they came prepared. They could multitask. They had incredible ideas. They really, really just were invaluable in what they were able to do as part of shaping policy, because many of these boards shape policy for the industry. And so that was an incredible, is to really be able to be a part of kind of springboarding these women into these opportunities. And the second was that I was sitting in his office one day and I said, I just don't understand why this is so difficult. And he looked at me and said, you need to start an organization. You need to do something where you're bringing women together to make them understand. And so that was really the genesis of the Women's Conference of Florida. It took me 14 years
to get there,
but
to see it.
It was the genesis. He really was like, he put that seed, you know, he was like, you have a responsibility because you're living it, you're seeing it.
And you see it. So it's like, what, you have to do something about it now. And I love that you shared that like through your experience, that's kind of what led you. Because I feel like a lot of women, and I know in your 20s, 30s, also you're trying to figure that out. And you're trying to see like, okay, what is it what's my purpose? Like, what's my drive? What's my goal? And it sounds like for you, you had to go through that journey of finding out like, what is the area that you see the need in? And what are areas that you can fit and empower women to do that? So at least through your story, like, have you seen that has changed of the women maybe in 2000s, 2015, 2020 till today, that women still struggle to show up and be in those rooms? How has that looked like for you?
I still see it. And I think in this day and age, we call it the imposter syndrome, where so many women are still feeling like, I don't belong in this room. And I think that is why, and I'm so committed through the Women's Conference of Florida, I have started the College Women on the Rise program and then the High School Girls Rise program, because if he would not have poured into me at such a young age, I would have never had the ability to be bold and to know and have that confidence in myself. And I think that is why we have got to do a better job of really reaching back into this next generation and finding ways to put these young girls in the room, to give them access to women that are leaders, for them at an earlier age to see themselves on a stage. Because we've heard that from these young women, they come to the conference, they're, and the speakers that we bring are so amazing because apart from their time on stage, they take time to spend with each of these young women. And I think that is what we need to be better at, so that we're preparing them at an earlier age. And look, I'm going to be honest, one of the things, and I'm very open about this, and sometimes women don't like to hear it, we have got to be kinder to each other. We're still not there. I still see so much, not so much in your generation. I think it's definitely gotten so much better, but I still see women that are holding back because they're afraid if they invite another woman into the room that they're going to lose their opportunity or their space or their seat. There is room and opportunity for everybody. There really, really is. And we still struggle with that. And men don't struggle with that the way that we do.
It's different. I was actually listening to a podcast on the way here about that like realistically, even though my generation, yes, has done a lot better of empowering and all of that, but it's kind of like in our subconscious that we still feel that like competition of like, no, we have to like become a little bit better. Like if I show up in this way, then they're going to like copy me and then I'm not going to be able to take it because they're going to do it better. Or, you know, so it's like getting out of that mindset.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It's so, but I'm going to be honest, even though I have a community of women and I have shared with you, like I'm all about collaboration. In the past few months, I have seen the other side of not the supportive side, you know, or the other reality that a lot of us don't want to talk about, or we don't want to say like all the girls aren't for the girls, unfortunately. And you will see that part. So how do you stay soft, or how do you stay open in a world that can be like that? How have you been able to still believe in that, even though maybe I'm sure you've had your stories of that? So can we talk a little bit about that if you feel comfortable?
It's interesting because I'm very open about this too. More men have helped me in my career than women have. I'm just going to be honest. And look, politics is a little different. I think it's evolved. Yeah. But for many, many years, women were just not involved in that industry. If you were maybe sort of a deputy fundraiser, or you were an assistant to the candidate. I mean, now women are chiefs of staff. Now women are press secretaries. We're, you know, policy directors. It's changed. It's evolved quite a bit. But for me, what I have learned, and, you know, when people ask me for advice, I feel that every one of us has a boat, right? And we're rowing in that boat. And what I say to women over and over, especially to the young generation, be very careful who you allow on your boat. Make sure that you're surrounding yourself with women that are going to really support you, right? That are not looking for an opportunity to use whatever you may have, but you really have to be diligent, and you have to be
discerning.
Very, very, very. And I'm not going to lie. I mean, I'm a faith girl. I pray about that a lot because I think we have the tendency to believe that everyone's our friend, and the tendency to believe, and it's terrible to think that way, but I think you really have to, because one bad person on that boat will disrupt the entire boat, right? We'll send it off course. We'll send it in a different direction. And look, I mean, when I started the Women's Conference of Florida, I had someone that approached me, and she was starting a women's organization, and she had come to the conference, and she loved our speakers, and she wanted me to introduce her. And, you know, we talked about how can we work together. I was all in, right? I was like, oh my gosh, another women's organization. This is fantastic. And I'm going to introduce her to this person, that person. And there was one speaker that she wanted really, really badly, who was a very dear friend of mine. And so I connected them. I asked her to go and speak for free. I mean, it was, and she called me from there. And she said, I'm about to give you a big lesson. What are you doing? She said, I walked into this event. It's your event. From the branding to the look, to the flow of the event, to everything. And she said to me, I'm here because of you. Like, you need to remember that. Don't do this again. I mean, she really taught me a big lesson. It's Nelly Galang. She's an amazing, amazing woman. But she did. She kind of said, you've got to be careful. You can't, I mean, you're killing yourself to do all of this. And, you know, it was a big lesson for me. It was very hurtful. Very hurtful. But it was a lesson I needed.
And I guess that taps into this question, which I feel like is very, you see it so much on social media, that copying versus inspiration, right? So if someone does, first, how did that make you feel? And second, what's the thin line of like someone being inspired because someone can love what you do, but them to do it exactly the same way as you do it? Where's that line for you, at least?
It was really hurtful, and it was really, and it was funny because I hate conflict. I hate it.
Like confrontation, you avoid it.
Typical female response of, I'm going to sit over here and just like vent in my own space
Yeah.
and just beat myself up and be angry and upset and disappointed and what could I have done differently and drive myself crazy, but I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
Because if I say something and then
It's going to seem
I'm sort of the mean
confrontational,
girl,
yes.
right?
Or not supportive or not collaborative.
Exactly. And so I finally said to myself, no, I need to say something. I can be respectful and I can do it in a very kind way, but I need to say something. And I did. I called her immediately following the event and I said, I'm very disappointed in the feedback that I received. And I just don't think that this was the right way to approach this because I was so open and I was being so helpful. And, she owned a little bit of it, not a lot. But I also learned a very big lesson. Her organization lasted 3 years. Because I think when you start something in that way, it's going to end in that way, right?
That's good.
And it was unfortunate because there was so much that we could have done together. There was so much, but it boils down to that queen bee syndrome of just, I'm going to hold on to it so tightly. But I think if I wouldn't have said something, it would have sort of not helped me grow because that ability to have a conversation in a respectful way and call it out. And I think women don't do that enough.
Yeah.
Right. We don't sort of, if we're in a business environment, we're doing all the work and the men aren't working as hard as we are and we're afraid to say something because is it going to impede us in some way? But what does that do? It just kind of just creates this sort of feeling inside
resentment. It can create like just starting to see the world in a different way because you're like, oh, so this person did this, so now I'm closed off. So I'm super like proud of you for having that conversation.
It was hard. It was really, really hard, and it was hard for her to hear.
Yeah.
Right. But I applaud Nellie for. She took the bold step, even though she knew it was going to hurt me, to say something.
Yeah.
And to teach me that I had to do better. That yes, we need to help each other because she's a big believer in helping other women. But I needed to be smarter about it.
Yeah.
And I needed to learn the art of negotiation. And I needed to learn the art of understanding, was this person the right person for me to partner with? Not everyone needs to be on my boat.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
So she taught me that, and that I'm eternally grateful for.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think that lesson I learned this past year, that was actually my word for the year, was assertiveness.
Right.
And I had a few situations that happened, and the old me, right, like the very timid, because I still, of course, we're always growing and evolving, but I was completely anti-confrontation for so long. Very people pleaser. That didn't last very long because I realized that doesn't work. And when you're trying to be assertive and confident and clear and a leader, like you have to speak up, like you have to. Maybe in your own way, right? In your own tone and all of that, but you have to confront. So I had a few situations that happened this past year, and it was something that did build my character. I feel like it showed me another area of how I can maybe not protect, but it's more like be wise in the way how I expose things, or know that at the end of the day, this is what I know is in my heart and what God has called me to do in my business. And at the end of the day, I am doing this in my own way. So people can, get inspiration or copy and stuff like that, but it will not be the same.
Exactly.
And that also doesn't mean that they're worse or they're not good enough like how I am. No, it's more like I'm in my own lane with this, and like I will continue to show up in my community. I will continue doing the good work that I'm doing, and also be very vigilant and wise with what I have.
Yeah. You have to be, because it's hard when you're pouring yourself into something like that, right? And someone does that to you, but I believe truly it's such a big life lesson.
Yeah.
Because it really, I think the key is the discernment, right?
Yeah.
And being able to now look at things through a different lens, because you also don't want to stifle yourself from helping. Because I am a big believer in to whom much is given, much is expected. I really, really believe in that. And again, I see it more in my generation because there weren't many opportunities for women like me. And I see the supportiveness that exists now in the younger generation. I mean, they really, and it's not perfect, of course, but they applaud one another. You really encourage one another. So it's, to me, it's kind of creating more of that environment. And I'll tell you, I think also through the organization, and some women haven't liked it, I've given younger women a voice, an opportunity to present, or an opportunity to be on a panel, or an opportunity. And I've gotten why would you? Well, because they've got something valuable to say. And I've learned to do that. Whereas you said before, I would have stayed quiet and kind of like, oh, well,
you're right. We should do this.
I'm not going to apologize for that. Because again, there's so much I'm learning from you. And what's wrong with admitting that, So it's really, it's an interesting space, and it's an interesting way to see the way that we treat each other, which unfortunately sometimes hinders us.
No, we always have to work and be open to maybe seeing, and I feel like that's also with like relationships with women. It's like seeing it as like being able to say sorry, being able to acknowledge your areas that maybe you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said it that way, or like maybe I did take something that was very, like, it's kind of like acknowledging those things and knowing that like you're still open and learning, and having those hard conversations is super important. And I want to say that when you actually had me on the panel, I felt very honored, because that's how I did feel in the beginning. I was like, oh my God, I'm the youngest one here. Like, and they have amazing experience.
Right. Yes.
But I also took it after reframe, right? Of like, I know that you also saw something in me. And I feel so honored for that, because I was like, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, because I know how much sometimes in my generation, a lot of women are like, well, until I get to like a certain space, that's when I have something to say, And it felt empowering for me to be like, no, like even in my journey and process of the things that I have learned, I can share from this.
And I'll tell you what it was, truthfully, kindness. Right? It's the ability, and this may sound, something, oh, that's corny. It's not. There is a light in people, right? And you see that, you pick up on it. And even though I hadn't met you in person, one, the feedback I was getting from people, and number two, as I was following you on social media, you see that person's ability. You can tell who someone is, right? You can tell if someone is being really truly themselves and who they are. And we have got to do a better, again, of bringing that light. I mean, the world is bad enough. I mean, the world is, but I am a big believer that there is the flip side to that. There is a lot of kindness and goodness. And if we show, the more that we show of that. And so I'm watching you building this community, this genuine, connectivity that does not, and look, people don't understand, that takes a lot of work behind the scenes, a lot of work. And people don't always show up, right? So you're putting all of this blood, sweat, and tears into something, and sometimes people don't show up. And so you can either quit or you can keep going. And so I saw this consistency with you, and this light and this kindness. And that is what I want to kind of propel to the next step. Because no, seriously, we've got to do a better job of it, because it's, I think that there's too much on social media, which isn't real. Right.
And so it's hard to decipher nowadays.
Yes. And I think people are getting better at it, though. They're getting better at seeing what authenticity is. And if I don't propel that forward, shame on me. So that's the way I look at it. So it really was that kindness and genuineness that I was seeing that was coming from you, and really wanting to help other women. And we need more of that around this state, not just here in Orlando, around the state. So to me, it was like, how can I partner with her? How can I do more with her? How can I, because that's the way that we're going to grow, whatever it is that we're doing. So
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I really appreciate that, because I feel like we were talking a little bit before of how hard it is on the back end, what people don't see. And I think that if all the steps that I have taken to like be where I am today, I know it's God first always, but then it's also the the showing up despite,
Yes.
with the health issues, with the
Yes.
financial, right, investments that you have to make, with certain sacrifices that you have to make, certain setbacks that you have as
Absolutely.
a woman, you know, and just being able to still show up. And that's what I hope to always show up in that way. So that's what I try to be as vulnerable on this podcast of sharing a lot of stuff that I've walked through. But ultimately, it's more to show that you can overcome and get through anything. And you can, at the end of the day, like, you can still help others while you're still a work in progress, you know, because I definitely do not have it all figured out.
But none of us do.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm 57 years old. There is so much I'm learning. And look, I think that's the other thing. I know what I don't know. I'm not going to pretend that I understand this new world of technology and all of the things that your generation is doing way better. So why not surround myself, right?
Yeah.
With women that do. I'm not going to be fearful of that because, what if they take something from No, it's like the collectiveness of all of that is what's really going to make the difference in the long run. So
for sure. So we have to share more of the women actually supporting, that are actually doing good things, or kindness in the world. Because it's true. It's like we see so much of the not side. But as at least like in the work that you've done over the years and just the impact that you have done in the women community and space, what have you seen? Because you are also someone that really champions women being in leadership roles and being in those seats in the table, around the table. So how have you seen that change and evolve? Do you feel like now today you have seen like a shift with like leadership? Because I know that when we talked at your event, you talked about Latina women not being as, you know, they're not in those tables or those rooms yet. Or maybe there's sometimes the lack of confidence, like what we were talking about earlier. So what are some things that maybe someone can do for that change? Yeah.
And it's what we were talking about was going back to the McKinsey report that was produced that demonstrates that still in 2024, there are not enough women in CEO positions. There's not enough women even in positions of leadership that can lead them to the point of becoming a CEO in a company, being appointed to a board, you know, all of these opportunities. And look, I think part of it, I can tell you from my personal experience, I loved my family dearly. And, you know, it's hard when you're the child of, you know, a family that has fled their native country, you know, for political, you know, communist reasons. I mean, they're coming to this country. They don't know the language. There's so many. So growing up, you know, it was interesting for me. I was sort of living two different lives. It's you're at home, right? In my case, my parents, you know, fled Cuba. And so I was living in this world that was just, it was a certain lifestyle, that wasn't necessarily the US, you know, but then I was at school and it was, you were trying to kind of assimilate and like be accepted, right? You know, I remember the school I was attending at the time in middle school, there were maybe 12 of us who were of Cuban American descent. And so we weren't, you know, we bonded for that reason because we weren't necessarily being, you know, accepted, and there was bullying and there were all of those things. I was an interpreter for my mom because she didn't know the language, right? So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And you're trying to grow as an individual while still maintaining, right, your cultural. But in my case, and again, you know, it's a lot of it is just that cultural mentality. You know, I had an older brother, and so my father owned a printing company at the time, and so he was going to follow in my father's footsteps. But I was still expected to work at the company, and I had all of these ideas, and you know, why don't we try this and that? And it was like, you know, and it was more the conversation of, when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? And I was like, I have all of these aspirations, right? I have all of these things that I want to do. And so when I set out to do them, that I was, again, bold enough to say, I love all of you very much, but I'm going to go, you know, do this, you know, do this over here instead. And it, you know, it was met with a little bit of, you know, hesitation, of course, but I learned that I had to kind of speak up for myself and go pursue these things that they truly didn't even understand what it was that I was doing. It was like,
you're like, she just around.
What is she
just
doing?
connecting with everybody.
And she's getting people and she's working. And so it was kind of funny. And so here's the interesting thing. So here I am, I'm doing all of this and I'm thinking, oh, the world, and I'm director of appointments and we're changing the world and the state and we're doing all of these things and things are getting better. Then I start the women's conference and I start the college girls program. And when I first approached these universities, I said, I don't, if they're sending me their best and brightest, and I sent all these applications back, I'm like, no. I'm looking for the young woman who would not be able to be in this room. I don't want the 5.2 GPA. I don't want the young woman that's, has the parents that have the resources. And they were like, wait, what? And I was like, no, I want diversity. I want young girls that are struggling. I don't want your best of the best. So when I started interacting with these young girls, that many were from Hispanic descent, Asian descent, African American, Haitian descent, it was, well, my parents are working in the field and they're picking strawberries. And so, yes, I'm in college, but they're really not supporting me. And I'm really supposed to go back to the family business. And they really keep asking me, why am I wasting my time? And I thought, wait a minute. I thought we had made all of these advancements. And I realized that there was still this incredible need to pour into these young women because there was an expectation still that was coming from their families of no, we're gonna indulge you for right now.
But you're gonna come back.
But the expectation is you're going, and I met this incredible young woman, actually the first year of the College Women on the Rise program, whose family had practically disowned her because she did decide to go to college and on her own had identified scholarships and financial support because she knew that her family didn't have the means. So she was stepping away and it was not met with kindness. It was met with a lot of resentment because she was the interpreter in her home. She was the individual that dealt with all of the health care. And from that, I mean, the bills that come with all of that and setting up appointments and transportation. And so her family was looking at her like, what are we supposed to do now? And so, we come from that place where we love our family because that's instilled in us at such a young age. But at the same time, we want to grow. And so there was a lot of resentment. There was a lot of, and she was by herself. I mean, she was really by herself. And so it's recognizing that, yes, although we've come a very long way, we have to look at these communities and really be very focused on understanding the needs that still exist and that in a lot of cases these young women don't have support and we need to do everything that we can to build these opportunities for them because they are bright and they are passionate and they're hungry and they will go make it happen. If you put them in the room, they will go figure it out.
And they want something more for their life. Like seeing them at your event, like giving out those scholarships, that made me so emotional because I'm like, that's so beautiful that you're empowering them and providing them an opportunity. That maybe they wouldn't get anywhere else. And like you're investing in them, like you're changing a life. Like every one of them is like a life, a path, someone that's going to impact this world, in their community. So it's just amazing to see that because I think that culturally there are still setbacks that we have.
Absolutely, there are.
And there are certain things like I shared at the event that for the panel of like, my mom, we were raised very differently in the way that we saw of like, she's very always working, wasn't the cook of the family, like very different, so I was raised with that mindset. But even though my mom was always in that space, like they come from like Honduras, which is very third world country, very, with machismo and a lot of things that, don't align with certain thinking of today, that aren't about women in succeeding in careers. And so I think just seeing that when being a first generation college student for myself, I still had to pave that way. Like I still had to, I remember filling out FAFSA like by myself and like colleges of like, okay, where am I going to go? You know, and they're like, yeah, like, you know, we believe in you, but I still had to like figure it out. So even the path that I'm in today, like my career is very different.
Right.
Like for my parents to grasp, they are very supportive of what I do, but I feel like it's also changed. So they're used to the office, corporate, like, okay, 9 to 5. And I'm like, my job is very different, you know, now.
Absolutely.
So I think it's also seeing that in today's day and age, like there's so many ways and so many different kinds of paths for you.
But see, and here's where the responsibility is on me, because I had mentioned this to you. We now need to take that voice, that panel, that conversation to a college campus. To a high school classroom.
Yeah.
Because imagine a young woman that is seeing you, not me, right? They can relate to you. So for me to be able to give you that platform, right? Now I'm allowing, because that has happened so many times at the conference, that college women and now the high school girls are coming to me saying, I never thought that I could. And now because I saw that person, right? And that's why I said to you after that panel discussion, we need to do this.
Take it to the colleges.
Correct. Because there is that responsibility. Imagine how many young girls you could impact if they heard your story, that your mother was supportive, but probably their family isn't being, but you are being bold and look at all of the things that you're doing. It really, you know, even if there's just one that walks away and says,
that's the impact.
It does. And that's where I think when I say, yes, we've come a long way. Yes, we've done a lot. Yes, but men are still in charge and they're still the ones that are opening those opportunities. But imagine if we take the platforms that we have, we create these spaces. I give you the opportunity to share your story and your voice. Now it's sort of kind of that impact that's reaching deeper and deeper. And I fully believe that that is what's going to change things. It's not when you're reaching, and I'm not saying that you can't make an impact in somebody's life when they're older. Of course you can, but it's still that reaching that younger person earlier in their life.
Yeah.
Because I truly believe they would make different choices.
Yeah.
And, it would springboard them into so many different things. Yeah. And maybe it's not just picking an industry, it's just that confidence, because as women, we lack that. We're still always apologizing. We're still always like, you know, doing like, oh, should I do this? Should I be on that board? Should I send in that application? Yes.
Yeah.
So
we cancel ourselves out of the room before we get there.
So imagine if a high school girl is hearing you going, wait a minute, I can do it. She did it. I can do it. I think that's where we're going to make the difference in creating more opportunities and spaces.
I love that. And I know that you do that through the Women's Conference of Florida and then Initiative for Young College Women. So at least with all the leadership, the rooms that you've been in, what is like the best piece of advice that you have received that has helped you to get to where you are today?
I think the best piece of advice is not to stay in the room that I don't belong in for too long. And here's what I mean by that. And I think women do that in every aspect of their life. I think sometimes we'll stay in a relationship too long because we're afraid to be by ourselves, right? Yeah. And what does that do? That impacts every other aspect of your life. And I do mentor a lot of young women. And when we have these conversations, I beg them, I call it go sit on the mountain. Why are you accepting this? Why are you saying this is okay? Where is the self-worth? Where is the confidence that because I truly believe, and that pours itself. If you're doing that in a personal relationship, you're going to do that professionally, right? You're going to do that in every aspect of your life. And so for me, truly, I think women stay in the wrong rooms too long. And we're fearful of saying, if we're in a job that we shouldn't be, if we're not being treated, you know, if we're not being compensated the right way, if we're not, again, in a respectful way, We need to advocate for ourselves. And so that was the best piece of advice that I received. Like, you're in this room.
Yeah.
Is it really the room that you're supposed to be in? Have you truly taken a step back? Why are you fearful to leave this room and go find the one that you're supposed to be in? That really was the best piece of advice. And when I took that step back and I realized that I was accepting things that I shouldn't be accepting, that I was professionally working harder than my male counterparts, and I had the strength and the confidence to stand up and walk out and say, I've appreciated my time here. I've learned a lot, but I also think I've come to a point where I'm giving more than I'm receiving. And it's time for me to move on. And yes, it's scary. And sometimes you're doing that and you don't know what's going to be on the other side of it. But I truly believe it's going to be better than being stagnant. And just accepting. And so I think that starts with our relationships and our personal lives. And then, it flows over into our professional. If we're really, really honest with ourselves, if we look in the mirror, if we say, is this the best that there is for me? As fearful as it may be that I don't know what's on the other side. So I think that's the best piece of advice that I've received.
I love that because it's true. It's like a lot of that is the unknowns, the scary, like
we don't want to be
comfortable.
By ourselves. Yes, we're afraid to be by ourselves. Ask yourself why. Go fix that.
The core
rather
issue.
Than staying, right? And rather than making excuses. And look, that could be at 19 and that can be at 25 and that can be at 35. It can be at any, but it's really having the confidence in yourself to say, this is not the best for me.
It's not working anymore.
Correct.
Giving me.
It's my responsibility to create that for ourselves. It's not somebody else's responsibility to make us happy. It's not somebody else's responsibility to make sure that we're in the right professional space. We need to create that for ourselves. And the funny thing is, when you do that, the opportunities will start to come in because people can tell when you're confident. People can tell when you're owning, better relationships will come your way, right? It's okay to be alone. It's okay to really find out who you are and kind of, use that for so many other opportunities, and they will come. It is just... I've seen it happen over and over and over again.
It's okay for change.
Absolutely.
Like, I think that when you get, when you rip the Band-Aid off of that, then you're like, it's okay that this was working for me then, but it's not anymore. And what are the possibilities?
And life is about seasons. Right? And some seasons are short and some seasons are longer. But it's when we have the boldness to step away from the wrong space and recognize that and also learn, like, how do I not do that again? Right? What do I need to learn about myself? It just, I think the growth that comes in that, it's unbelievable. And I've seen it happen not only in my life, but in so many other women that I've mentored and helped. It's the confidence that comes in that pours over into every aspect of your life.
Because I feel like once you overcome a shift like that, you're like, wait, I got through that. And I was able to come out on the other side and like something good came out of it. And now it's like, if I take this risk or I leave this job or I leave this relationship, like whatever that looks like, there has to be something. And it's going to teach me something along the way too.
And I think it also will teach you what to say yes to. Not all friendships are going to be great. Not all relationships, so it's going to be a lot of that.
For sure.
Going back to that, making sure you've got the right people on your boat rowing in the same direction as you are.
And I always say too that like a huge part of like who I am today is also cultivating that healthy relationship with myself, my own mindset, my own healing, because then that's how I'm able to show up in different spaces. Like sometimes I have felt that my business, my entrepreneurship has shown me so many areas that I can grow in,
Absolutely.
And it's been like a journey of like challenging that mindset or challenging those beliefs about myself that maybe before when I didn't have those challenges, like I never knew. I was like, oh, everything's fine.
And it's not just showing up, it's showing up with your best self.
Yes.
Healthy,
For sure.
emotionally, physically. It's that really, I think if we learn to do that, it will change the trajectory of everything around you.
For sure. How do you show up on those days that are maybe difficult, maybe with your health, with those challenges, you know, that maybe that mindset that you were just having a really rough week and you're trying to get out of it? Or how do you show up still?
You know,
in
I
those?
haven't, I've had a lot of health issues in the past few years. I, was in this point of my career where everything was going great. I had this great opportunity to move to New York. I was going to go work for Bloomberg, and then boom, I had this health crisis that changed everything in my life. And it took me, a full year to recuperate, the beginning of what led to 6.5 years before I was able to secure a kidney transplant. And it was a very long journey. I was very hesitant to share. I was afraid that if I did, the clients that I had on my professional side would say, can she handle this job? Is she going to be able to complete a project? So for a very long time, I kept everything to myself until I realized that I was exhausting, right? Every aspect of my life, I was exhausted. So what I have learned to do, I'm going to be very honest, is I've learned to say no to a lot of things. I've learned to be very specific about what I do with my time and what I pour myself into. Because I think as women, we feel the need to always say yes to everything, whether it's if you're, as a mother, as a professional, as someone who's starting a business, there's this fear of saying no to things. And if I say no to this, and something better is not going to come along, right? And so I've learned to be very intentional with, even the clients that I will work with, the friends and the relationships that I establish, the projects that I, and even the events. I think sometimes we feel like we've got to be in every room and we've got to do everything. And if we don't, and I think sometimes, again, we don't bring our best selves when we do that. So intentionality is very important for me. Not just emotionally, but mentally and professionally. I think it impacts everything. And so that for me has been a big part of my growth and my journey is learning my vulnerability. And look, it's interesting, when I started sharing my health journey, there were so many women that came to me and said, I have breast cancer. I haven't told anybody for fear that I've got, heart disease. I've just encountered this issue. And so many women, that were holding back. And you really then open the space for that conversation.
And that vulnerability that people want.
That women, again, we tend to hold on to because we're afraid that if we share too much, people are going to say, well, she can't do that. And so we're going to,
it's like a weakness.
And I will tell you another thing I've learned. We think people are thinking about us more than they are. They're just not. I mean, so many people, so many of my clients, I would call them and be like, listen, I'm going to, okay. Can you just have that for me ready by Friday? Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. You know what I mean? And so we're also creating this scenario in our heads that just hold us back. And, it's exhausting. It is. It's exhausting.
And can hinder us from the thing that we're doing. So I thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being honest with us today. Because I feel like a lot of people maybe see themselves in that they're like, yeah, but I have this, that. Like, how can I continue doing this stuff, that I'm doing? And I shared with you a little bit before. So I am walking through my own health journey and it's been very difficult, and I feel like at that age, like I'm 29. So it's like, I feel like I don't see a lot of people around me that at this age have struggled in this way of like autoimmune disease and just, your body dysregulated.
It's
and
not
you're
your
just
friend
like,
every day.
No. And so having flare-ups, like having a lot of doctor's appointments and like, not having the answers that you want, but then you're like doing the best to try to show up. And, and it's been something of like that back and forth of like, I'm going to keep showing up in the best way. Right.
That
and
you can.
And and I'll also communicate with my peers. And I have been so honest with my team of like, hey guys, like this week I'm really feeling off. Like, can you help me in this area at the event? Or hey, like how you said, it's like,
Yes.
I don't always have to be the person that does all
Yeah.
the roles, you know? And so having that support is super helpful too. Because I think that there's just so many things as like the pressures of you trying to show up in your best self, you feeling like you have to exceed your own expectations.
Right.
And just being honest of like, intentionality, which that's actually on my vision board this year.
Yes.
It's being intentional of everything that I do. Is that
Yes.
going towards the vision, and I show up in the best way, and I don't give up. That's it.
And no, I think as women too, sometimes we're like, I am woman, hear me roar. We're gonna, we're human.
Yeah.
We you can't do it all. And that was, to me, it was also the pride of, I don't need help. Like if you call me for help, I got you, girl.
Yeah,
like I am gonna be your
there.
girl.
Yeah.
But, and it took one of my dear
struggle.
friends looking at me and saying, you need to stop this because you need help and you need to learn to ask for help. And we have a very hard time doing that. And listen, I think, again, going back to the boat, I have 3 ride or dies. I know these 3 women. And that's all you need. You don't need 20 people. You don't need, I've got 3. I know those women. If I call them at 1 a.m., 6 a.m., whatever, they are there. And I think that's important. You really learn who your tribe is. And it's okay that it's not going to be 20 people. It's okay that sometimes you think it's going to be someone and they're not. I mean, they're human. But it's important to identify who that is. And because listen, I always say there's life, right? And in the middle of that word, there's the word if. And you just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what life is going to bring you tomorrow. And if there's a health issue, if there's a financial struggle, if you lose the client, if you have a parent that needs you to now be a caretaker, right? If you have the difficulty in the relationship or in the marriage or whatever it may be, how are you going to handle that? So I think having that support and really being vulnerable, it's just so important. We've got to learn to open up and know when to ask for help and know when to say, I can't be there tonight. You know, I just can't do it. And that's okay. No one's going to think less of you. I think that is really for our own health and mental wellness. It's extremely important.
And I think being in tune with ourselves of what that looks like, and it might be a season or it might be, hey, this year might look very different than last year. But I think that's so important. Thank you so much for sharing. And I know everyone listening really got some nuggets from today. I love always listening back and being like, yes, that was so good.
That was good. That was good.
So I feel like we're just friends, just chatting.
We are.
And I really appreciate you.
You are a bright light. You've got so much to do and give. I know you do.
And however I can help support
Thank you.
all the causes
listen, I'm already like, yes.
No, definitely. And so what's next for you? Like, what are ways that people can connect and see all that you are doing?
With the Women's Conference, we are going into our 10th year, believe it or not. And so my intentionality for this year is to really expose what we do and what we're about to as many women across the state. Obviously, I want everybody to come to the annual conference, which this year will be in September. But to really, for me, it's to get into the markets. It's to do more events. It's to, if my health permits, is to be able to really be intentional about providing these incredible women who I now call friends to come into these markets to impart their wisdom and their story. It's to really create that. So for me, it's having more women follow us on social media at the Women's Conference. It's really having them, come to the events and creating spaces that, women are struggling financially, right? Women are really, so for me, it's how do I, cultivate an experience that they don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, now I gotta, it's that really, it's working hard in that. And that's my goal in this 10th year is to make our organization as accessible and creating partnerships with women like you.
Something in Orlando,
collaborating, absolutely. Finding the right people because not everybody's going to be the right person or organization that has the values that we have and really truly helping look, growing the organization is great, and it's important. But it's also, how do I help as many women as I can and expose them to what we're trying to do.
No, you're doing amazing work
Thank
over
you.
there. And honestly, I will put all their information down below of the Women Conference of Florida, how to connect with Conversa as well.
Yes.
Correct?
Our PR company, yes.
PR company doing amazing work as
Thank
well.
you.
And
Thank
really
you.
just thankful for you making the time to join us today.
You need to come next
honored.
year and moderate a panel, one of our breakout
I would love
sessions.
that.
That's the goal.
I would love that. No, that's honestly something that from last year I took away of like, okay, I want to be in those rooms around it, just pouring out of those things that I already know, to help either the next generation or even women of any age that can take something from, my experience.
It's amazing how you can change someone's life. Yeah. And, I think God puts them in front of us and it's just up to us
it's obedience.
To say yes.
We just show up and that's it.
Absolutely.
No, so thank you so much, Arlene.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun. I always love seeing you.
Yeah, same. And that color on you, 10 out of 10, we were talking about that before. That is your color.
Thank you.
So
thank you, my dear.
Thank you for joining me on this week's podcast episode. I love the conversation with Arlene because it just reminded me that there is space for all of us and that we are so much better together when we're vulnerable, honest, when we speak boldly. And that's what I feel like I got from her, was just how being courageous and bold and showing up is so important. And so if you enjoy this conversation, make sure to share it with a friend, share it on your social media, and tag us at Elizabeth Savvy and Women Conference of Florida. And make sure to subscribe and leave a review. Let us know what you're loving and what you would love to hear more about. And I hope to see you guys next week.